I am almost caught up with my recent reads. Keyword being almost. Hello everyone, my name is Olivia and welcome to another recent reads, and this recent reads, you guessed it, is being sponsored by Skillshare. And thank you so much to them for sponsoring this wonderful series that I made. If you are like me and you're constantly trying to learn new things and gain new skills, then you would love Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community offering classes on so many topics. Some of my favorite classes focus on editing videos, creativity, writing, and plant care. Because I've been in a creative rut, I recently began this class called Creative Breakthrough, 8 exercises to power your creativity, confidence, and career, to gain some insight into other creatives and how they get inspired by the world around them. Skillshare is full of inspiring people ready to tell you about their craft and to offer you insight that will develop your skills and teach you something new. If you are interested in joining Skillshare, the first 1,000 of you to click the link in my description will get a free trial of Skillshare Premium membership. New courses are always being added to their site, so if you want to continue your membership after your free trial, it will be less than $10 a month. Now, on to the recent reads. So let's get into... what number are we on? I want to say my 51st read to my 60th read. So let's talk about those books. So the first book that I want to talk about is The Traveling Cat Chronicles. This is written by Hiro Arikawa and it was translated by Philip Gabriel. This is a book that I read on audiobook, and I read it because I heard Raylene talking about it on the Books Unbound podcast, and it is about a cat and its owner, and they are on a road trip, but the story is told from the cat's perspective. The cat Nena's owner Satoru is traveling around Japan trying to get rid of his cat Nena, and Nena is meeting all these different people from Satoru's past, and he is wondering why Satoru wants to get rid of him. So we get to see Satoru's past through the eyes of Nena, who is narrating this whole entire story, and I think it's so incredibly unique to have a cat narrate a story. It was just such a sweet story while also having some very serious moments. I loved Nana's perspective. I loved Satoru, who was just such a sweet man who just wanted to take care of his wonderful little cat. And I had so much fun with this because I listened to an audiobook and the narrator really brought Nana's perspective to life. The way that he narrated Nana's thoughts was adorable, and I think if you were to read this book, I would highly recommend the audiobook. One, because it's pretty quick to read, and two, it is just a entertaining audiobook to read, and I really enjoyed the uniqueness of it all. I highly recommend it, and I definitely want a copy for my room because I think it's one of the cutest stories that I've ever read. Then I read a romance called Xeni by Rebekah Weatherspoon, who is like the queen of romance. I love her stories so much. They're never not under 4 stars for me. So Xeni is about a woman named Xeni, and she goes to upstate New York because her aunt just recently passed, and Xeni goes to the hearing of the will, and she finds out that her aunt left her the entire property in upstate New York to her as long as she agrees to marry a man named Mason who works in the ranch in town. And Mason is a really adorable, very sweet Scottish man who Xeni's aunt was friends with, and Xeni's aunt knew that Xeni would need someone to fill the hole in her heart after her passing, so she knew that it would be a wonderful pairing to pair up Xeni and Mason. So this story is about Xeni and Mason getting to know each other after a very big loss that they both had to go through, and as they grow closer to each other and as they get to know one another, they start to fall in love with each other over the short period of time that they spend together. And it is such a cute autumnal type of read because they are in upstate New York, they are on a ranch, and it's a very cozy setting, and I really enjoy just seeing their relationship blossom. While it did develop over a short period of time, it was very believable in their romance, and the only thing that I can think of that I wanted more from this story is the fact that I wish it was a little bit longer so I could see more of their relationship develop, because I really enjoyed reading about them. But it was just such a good romance. I really enjoyed it, and I just love Rebekah Weatherspoon with my whole heart. The next book I read was because of Riley and Haley. They both recommended me this book and they thought that I would enjoy it because I really enjoy historical fiction, and it is Lovely War by Julie Berry. This is one of the most unique historical fictions I have ever read because it mixes historical fiction with fantasy because it's being narrated by the Greek gods. So this is a story about four mortals during World War II and World War I, and it shows how their relationship and their romance blossoms over the course of time, but it's told through the perspective of Aphrodite, who is basically really rooting for these two couples. So you get to see both of these wars from vastly different perspectives, and I thought that the way that this book was written was one of the most beautifully written YA historical fictions that I've ever read. The writing style was just absolutely stunning. I highlighted a bunch of this story because I just really enjoyed Julie Berry's writing style. I think she is incredibly talented, and while this story did get a little dry in the middle when it's talking about war and soldiers, and I'm just like, I don't really know what's happening, I still thought it was beautifully written, and I really enjoyed the two romances that were in this story. They were both very heartbreaking and lovely, and I think this is a really good book if you're looking for a beautiful historical fiction with a bit of a fantasy element to it. It's not too big of a fantasy element because it's mostly just the gods telling the story. That's like the biggest element of fantasy in it, but it's still a stunning historical fiction, and I really enjoyed it, even though it was a little dry in the middle. Then I read I'll Be the One by Lyla Lee. I feel like I'm losing my voice. I'll Be the One is about a plus-sized Korean-American teenager who decides to audition for a K-pop competition in America. So the competition is that you can either be a singer or a dancer, and you compete against a bunch of other people, and if you were to win, you get to travel to Korea to go to essentially a K-pop boot camp to be in K-pop Idol. So our main character, Sky, decides to audition both as a singer and a dancer, and this is the story of the competition and the people that she meets in the competition, whether they are good or bad. It really talks about the Korean beauty standards in that they don't believe that plus-sized people could be K-pop idols, and Sky decides to break against those barriers and really put herself out there and stand up for herself in order to show the world that you can be plus-sized and you could be a K-pop idol. And I thought this story was so cute, and I really enjoyed learning more about like the difficulties of being a K-pop star, and I just really enjoyed seeing Sky stand up to her mother, who doesn't believe in her dreams and who doesn't really believe in her as a person. And I just loved the different topics that were spoken about in this book, and both the main character and the love interest are bi, and I think A+, 10 out of 10, give it an Oscar. Amazing. So much fun. Then I read a YA book that I did not enjoy, and it was I See London, I See France by Sarah Mlynowski. This is about two friends who go to Europe after they graduate high school, and they have been planning this trip for years. So when these two characters fly to London, they find out that Leela, the best friend's ex-boyfriend, and his friend are also on the flight, and they decide to crash their trip that these two best friends have been planning for years upon years. And as someone who has Virgo in her chart, that would drive me bonkers. If I was planning a trip with my best friend for years upon years, to Europe no less, very expensive. If I was planning that trip with my friend and she decided to let her ex-boyfriend who cheated on her join the trip with his random friend, I would lose my mind, because the main character is like me. She planned this trip for years and she was really looking forward to it. She had a set schedule that she wanted to follow, and her best friend continually flakes on her and goes off on trips with her ex-boyfriend, which leaves the main character with her best friend's ex's friend to hang out with on this European trip where they're spending so much money. It's just like, I don't understand. This book was not good. The main character and the best friend did not have a good relationship. It was very toxic, and the best friend was just a really mean person in the way that she treated the main character, Sydney. I honestly could never allow strangers to go onto my European trip that I planned. I think that the main character, Sydney, deserves a better best friend, because if my friend ditched me to go hang out with her ex-boyfriend in Europe while I'm alone, I would have a different best friend. The next book that I read was a nonfiction, and I read it on audiobook, and it is Stamped: Racism, Antiracism, and You, and it was written by Jason Reynolds and Ibram X. Kendi. This is like a shortened down version of Stamped at the Beginning by Ibram X. Kendi, and this is an audiobook about the history of race and racism and how it affects us today. And Stamped was a wonderful, amazing, give it an Oscar audiobook about the history of racism. It taught me so many things that I didn't learn about in high school, and I feel like this book would be amazing for high school history classes. I think that it would be really beneficial for kids to read this in high school so you could learn about the history of racism and how that history directly affects us right now. And I think it's a very timely read that everyone should pick up, considering the fact that it is a shortened down version of Stamped at the Beginning. In case that intimidates you, I think this is a very accessible read for anyone of any age if you're in high school or older. And I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the commentary that Jason Reynolds puts into Ibram X. Kendi's history that he provided. Like I said, again, very eye-opening in the history of racism and how it affects quite literally every area of life. Then I read a disappointing read. We have some good reads, we have some bad reads. We are full of surprises in this recent reads, and it was The Prisoner of Heaven by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. This is the third book in the Shadow of the Wind series. This really short book follows our main character Daniel, who works at the bookshop that is mentioned in The Shadow of the Wind, and he is friends with a man named Fedmin. So this book explores Fedmin's past, and it explores his time in a prison where he met other characters that are from the Angels game. And I did not enjoy this book. I read a lot of reviews on Goodreads saying that this wasn't his best book, and I completely agree with that. One, it was way too short, but I'm glad it was short because the story just wasn't interesting for me. I did not care about Fedmin's life whatsoever. It had some beautiful writing, but I was not a fan of this book to the point where I couldn't finish it physically, so I listened to the rest of the story on audiobook. So if that tells you anything about how I feel about the book, that's that. Okay, let's move on to another disappointing read that I did not finish, but I'm counting as a book that I finished for this recent reads, and it is Dreaming in Cuban by Cristina García. This is a book about a bunch of generations of Cuban women who are all related to one another, and how their time in Cuba affected their lives. Let me see how many pages I had left. I had 40 pages left of this book, and I did not want to finish it. It was a drag to get through. The writing style was just very dry and uninteresting, and I was not really invested in the plot, nor was I interested in the characters. And yeah, it was just a very dry read. The next book that I read was an audiobook, and it is Human Acts by Kang. In the midst of a violent student uprising in South Korea, a young boy named Dong Ho is shockingly killed. This story follows the perspective of people who are connected to this one person and how their lives are drastically changed because of this murder. And I thought this audiobook was really well done. It's a full cast audiobook narrated by some really well-known people, and I thought it was beautifully narrated. I do have to say that I was not completely won over by the story because of the perspective that it was written in. I think it was written in second perspective. I feel like it created some distance between me and the book, so I was not completely connecting to the story because of the writing style, but it's still a very eye-opening read about a piece of history that I did not know about these uprisings in South Korea. So if you're interested in learning more about that, this book was phenomenal in doing that, but I do have to say that the writing style was just something that I wasn't a complete fan of. Then I read another audiobook because I can finish books so much quicker on audiobook than I can read them, and it is Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reid. This is about a black woman named Amira, and she is a babysitter for a white household. So one day this household has an emergency, so they call Amira to take their daughter Briar to a local supermarket that Briar loves to visit. So Amira is babysitting Briar, and the security guard stops Amira and questions her and kind of acts like Amira is kidnapping Briar. So because of this incident, the mother of Briar, Alix, decides to really take everything into her own hands and try and overly fix this situation by being very performative in caring about Amira's life. While you would think that the story centers mostly around that incident that happened, it kind of just follows the aftermath of that and how people in different situations can be very performative in their allyship. And I think it would make a wonderful mini-series on like HBO or Amazon Prime. You know who could play Alix amazingly? Reese Witherspoon. We all know she can play her. We all know she's probably gonna play her. Reese Witherspoon can bring Alix to life. Alix reminds me of the woman from Big Little Lies, the one that Reese Witherspoon plays. It's just like such a fake type of character where she pretends to care about others, but really she's just trying to better herself and feel like she's a better human being because she's helping others that she thinks is beneath her. That's the only way I could describe it. And I know it's being turned into a show. I'm just saying. Reese Witherspoon should play her. Alix, I mean. So that's it. That's my recent reads. I still have one more of these videos to film. I'm really behind on this, but I hope you enjoyed hearing my thoughts about the books that I recently read. So let me know if you read any of these books and what you think about them yourselves. And let me know what you're currently reading. I would love to know. I love asking that question because obviously that answer always changes, so I think it's always fun to ask. But if you have not followed me here or on Instagram at Stories for Coffee, be sure to do so. It's a wonderful way to support me. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will see you in another video. Bye!